Hello. In today's reflection, I want to focus on a book that I read recently, which has rung all sorts of bells with me. One of those books that stays with you because of connections that you have. It's a book that's written by James Rebanks, and it's called English Pastoral. It's the story of his life on a Cumbrian fell farm, a life that has spanned 3 generations and culminating in him now being responsible for the farm himself. One of the reasons that it stayed with me and that it will continue to is that I spent my early years on a farm. We lived in Newton Willows, and we had a farm there which was owned by Lord Newton. We were tenant farmers, and we farmed 70 acres of land, and we had the farm buildings and the farmhouse. And in those 70 acres, we did a lot with it. We grazed cattle, we had pigs and chickens, and we had other farm life. We grew potatoes and variety of vegetables, and we had hay at the season, and also we grew wheat crops as appropriate. So we had a really busy farming life. Well, I say we, my uncles did. I don't suppose I was much help around the farmyard then, although I did continue to be involved during my teenage years, helping out. And one of the things that we did was provide we were a resource for the community as well. We had a small farm shop, and also it was that time, 1950s, when the beginning of the October half term, there'd be a queue of people at the gate waiting to join in the potato picking weeks as they were known. That's when schools gave us time off to pick potatoes. And during the summer, during the harvesting of the hay and in particular the wheat crops, they were fantastic times. People gathering together, helping out in stacking the bales and loading the sheaves onto the lorry, and in particular the visit of the thresher machine, which was like this invasion of something from another planet arriving on the farm for a few days. Really exciting for an 8-year-old. Probably wouldn't look quite so exciting today. In English Pastoral, James Rebanks recalls his time following his grandfather around, being introduced to how farming fits in with the seasons, how farming works with the habitat that it's surrounded by, that it's placed in, and how the two are inseparable. And so that's what as a child, that's what his childhood memory was of that sort of life, that sort of farming. When it passed over to his father, the world had changed and the challenges were very different. His father was faced with the challenge of growing mechanisation, of needing to farm on a much bigger scale. The small tenant farmers that existed before no longer had the space and the opportunity to farm on a scale that the world required. The expanding populations here and across the globe meant that farming needed to change, and therein lies part of our problem today, because those changes that were needed changed also the habitat. Farms needed to be able to have bigger machinery to do what they needed to do. They had several plantings in a year. They took out hedges and stone walls to make it easier for larger machinery to farm the land, and yet at the same time changing its appearance, in many ways, once and for all. And we can't say that wasn't necessary up to a point, because with the expanding population here and across the globe, we need to feed those mouths. We need to feed human beings worldwide. And yet I can't help but think of John Steinbeck's book, Grapes of Wrath, and how that 1930s movement of industrial farming in the States created a huge movement and growth of problems for population, as well as a problem of creating a dust bowl. In the end, James inherits the farm, and in the final section, he questions of the book, he questions very much of the sort of things that are on our minds today. He asks questions about how we should and do and can manage the challenge of food production on a larger scale, which is necessary, with the need for farming also to be what it always has been, to support the habitat in which it's situated. So to nurture the land in such a way that birds, flora and fauna of all kinds, hedgerows, are not there for cosmetic purposes, but have a life, have a role, have a meaning in the part of the countryside and of the nation which we experience and which we depend on. Farming is about working with the whole. It's about working with the seasons. And really, that's what James's book is about. And yet we've all got used to having the same foods available all year round. We are a very cosmopolitan population, and we need that facility. Perhaps gone are those days when we can just say we eat the produce in its due season. But there is a value to that which we shouldn't lose. And it saddens me that to hear one of the statistics this year is how many million tons of food waste there is, and especially potatoes, one of our staples, so much going straight into landfill and compost. These are big debates, and I just want to read one of the final paragraphs in his book, which I think picks up my thoughts about where we are now. And I'll leave it for discussion. Come back at me for all the gaps that I've left in thinking about the world where I have this morning. What will our descendants say of us years from now? How will we be judged? Will they stand in the dust of a scorched and hostile world, surrounded by the ruins of all that exists today, and think that we, who could have saved the earth, were thoughtless vandals, too selfish or too stupid to turn back? Will the future know us as the generation who pushed everything too far, on whose world the watch began to fall apart, who had so little courage and wisdom that we turned away from our responsibilities? Or will they lie in the cool green light of the oak trees that we planted and be proud of us? The generation that pulled things back from the abyss, the generation that was brave enough to face up to our own flaws, big enough to overlook our differences and work together, and wise enough to see that life was about more than shop-bought things, a generation that rose above itself to build a better and more just world. This is our choice, and we are at a fork in the road. Discuss.